Well, hey there, Dr. Franklin here, and we're going to talk about communication. Why are we talking about communication? We're talking about communication because it is the foundation of a good relationship. You know, if there's a couple out there that is really happy and really content and is really looking forward to the long-term trajectory of their relationship, I guarantee you that you can point to the communication styles that they have, and you'll be able to see a healthy dynamic there. You'll be able to see a dynamic in which both perspectives are being taken into consideration. Both experiences are being taken into consideration. Compromises are taking place. Both parties feel heard. Both parties feel understood. Compromises are coming about. And all of that in culmination is helping that couple to move forward into reality that they will see sooner than later. Now, if you look at a couple that is very distressed, very discontent, I almost guarantee you that some of that distress, some of that discontent is coming about as a means of miscommunication or dysfunctional communication patterns. So in this presentation, what I'm going to do is highlight some dysfunctional communication patterns, and then towards the end of it, I'm going to give you some tips as to how to navigate that in your relationship. Because sometimes if you're just aware of the fact that these phenomenon are cropping up in your intimate relationships, then it kind of gives you the possibility to navigate it and not continue to do something over and over and over again, perpetuating these cycles that ultimately leave you discontent and not having the optimal quality of life that you really desire. So listen. If there is a presentation that I've disseminated over the course of the semester that is critical as this one, let me know so I can take it down. No, seriously, this is a really important presentation. If you don't walk away with this from this course with anything, I'm hoping that you walk away from this course with something really practical from this presentation. Stick around and let's get into it. So the first dysfunctional communication pattern we're going to talk about is the kitchen sinking approach. Let's just kind of explain what goes into the kitchen sink. Let's act like we're elementary children for a second and just talk about what goes into the kitchen sink. So when you put things into the kitchen sink, you got forks that go in there, spoons that go in there, plates that go in there, bowls that go in there, a colander that may go in there, a pot, a pan, all of this different stuff goes into the kitchen sink. What a lot of researchers have found is that happy couples have a tendency to say what they mean and mean what they say. In other words, they are precise and they don't take the kitchen sinking approach in their conflict resolution approach. Kitchen sinking within conflict resolution approach would look like this. My primary concern is the panties that are always by the bathtub, or the dingy, dirty boxers that are always by the bathtub whenever I enter into the bathroom to take a shower. But instead of just specifically addressing that issue, I throw in all these other issues that I may have not even told my partner about. So I'm talking about the drawers by the bathtub. I'm talking about the squandering of the finances. I'm talking about the lack of time management. I'm talking about the lack of child care duties. I'm talking about the fact that you're at the gym while I'm at home mopping, and we need to divide up these chores properly. So this is a dysfunctional communication pattern. Why? Because this will cause topics to drift off beam. You completely get off track, right? The recipient of the message will get so lost in all of the issues that are being brought up that nothing potentially may be resolved. So we need to be precise when we're communicating with them. You know, the number 2 dysfunctional communication pattern I want to talk about is mind reading. And this is when individuals in their relationships assume that they know what their partners are thinking, they know what their partners are feeling, and they understand the opinions of their partner without checking in with their partner. And we all do this in our intimate relationships from time to time. We tend to do a bit of mind reading, or we may have the expectation that our other partner automatically knows what's on our mind, our feelings, and our opinions in regard to something. However, if we fail to check in, if we fail to just go, hey, am I understanding you correctly? You ask a clarifying question, or perhaps paraphrase that material back to your partner so that they understand that they're being understood, then we may fall victim to that dysfunctional communication style. So folks, I kind of want to talk about 3 at number 3 because there's just so many dysfunctional communication patterns out there. I'm going to kind of synthesize things for number 3. Number 3, folks, first one I want to talk about is cross-complaining. Cross-complaining is when the recipient of an issue, right, the individual that is getting a complaint, right, comes up with a complaint of their own and they give it to their partner right there in the moment of fellowship. So an example of this could be a wife going, honey, every time I turn around, you're leaving your dirty drawers by the bathtub. I would really appreciate it if you would, pick those up. If the husband in return said, well, you know what? You think you're dealing with that. I have to deal with the fact that I don't get a meal every night at dinner. I'm expecting you to cook for the family every single night. The issue that comes up with cross complaints is that conversations will get off beam. So there's no precision, there's no focus, and there's the risk of just increasing tension taking place in a relationship. So we got to really be careful with cross complaining. Now that husband has a valid concern. Right? He has a valid concern. If that's something they agreed upon in their relationship, if that's how their relationship operates, and that's a need that he wants to have met, then, it should be discussed. But the timing of him presenting that issue is problematic. So you got to be careful with cross complaining, because it may leave the person with the initial complaint feeling not understood, not heard, and there's a high likelihood that that person may not get a solution to their issue, because all of a sudden the tables may turn, and now, wife may decide to focus on her husband's issue. The other thing I want to talk about is yes butting. Yes butting is when an individual expresses agreement or a willingness to do something, but then in the second half of their statement expressing agreement, they voice hopelessness or a belief that it won't work out. In other words, they are very critical about the approach that they're agreeing to take. An example of this could be, yes, honey, I will try to ensure that we go on a date night every 3 weeks, but I don't think it's going to work. Now that's problematic, because that person in the dyad is going, all right, I'm going to do this, but I don't think it's going to work. Well, if you don't think it's going to work, then let's see if we can find another solution as to what could work for the both of us. Right? That's the approach to take. For if anything, don't agree to do something that you don't think is going to work out. So yes, butting. We want to be careful with that. And then finally, interruptions. Interruptions can be problematic when there's tense moments of fellowship. Now, interruptions aren't bad across the board. Sometimes interruptions can be timely. It can bring a great deal of clarification. It can enhance the likelihood that understanding takes place. But it depends on what's happening during the interruption. So what is happening? Is there yelling? Is there screaming? Is there kitchen sinking taking place? Right? Are clarifying questions being asked? These are things you want to consider thinking about before you interrupt somebody who's really taking time to express their thoughts, feelings, and opinions. And then we also should be receptive to how the person is communicating non-verbally. That is the person that's being interrupted. So are they taking the interruption well, or would they much prefer that individuals wait until they finish speaking before they got the question or they got whatever their partner wanted to say? 3 at 3. My pastor at Calvary Revival Church, Bishop Courtney McBath, usually says this statement after he asks the congregants to greet each other in Jesus' name. So he'll say, if you're happy and you know it, tell your face. Now, I'm sure we've all heard the song, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. But sometimes if you're happy, if you're content, if you know that things are going to work out, right? If you're trying to keep your cool, if you're trying to remain phlegmatic, sometimes you got to tell your face that you're trying to do that. So sometimes when we're in moments of tense fellowship, face is all jacked up, all contorted. We're bracing ourselves to fight. And you got to remember that, wait a second, the person that you're in an intimate relationship with, right? This is somebody that you love. This is somebody that you respect. This is somebody that you adore. This is somebody that you have invested in. And they've done all of that, hopefully, to you. So if you're happy and you know it and you want things to work out, tell your face, fix your face, get your emotional presentation together, and that's just a bonus one. So number 4, what I want to talk about at 4 is contempt. To treat something in contempt is to treat it as if it's vile, treat it as if it's worthless, treat it mean, treat it with disdain. And if you're in an intimate relationship, if you've taken the time to really embrace monogamy and really invest in a person and really get to know them and love them, then you want to make sure that you're treating them like that, even in moments of tense fellowship. With that being said, you want to make sure that you're always addressing behavior and you're not necessarily addressing the person or the character in the statements that you're saying. So it's one thing to talk about the dirty drawers that are being left by the bathtub. It's a whole nother thing to tell that person that they're a slob, tell that person that they're a jerk, to tell that person that they're inept, to tell that person that they're worthless, that they're not smart, that they're stupid, that they're dumb, that they're whatever pejorative or derogatory remark you want to put in there. You want to be careful. Remember, if you're in an intimate relationship with this person, you want to make sure that you treat them like the jewel that they are, right? If they're your king, they're your queen, right? They're your princess, whoever they may be. You want to make sure that you hold them in high esteem, and this includes doing so even in tense moments of fellowship. If an individual exercises a great deal of contempt in their dynamic, then what's likely to happen is that the recipient of that contempt may start stonewalling. In other words, they may just shut down completely. They may stop talking, right? They may stop communicating. And quietness can mean a great deal of things. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of quietude, but within this context, it's destructive. It can really hamper the relationship from growing and flourishing and being everything that it could be. And then if stonewalling doesn't take place as a result of contempt, then there's a great likelihood, that we're going to see a great deal of belligerence starts to occur, and then we're going to see passive aggressiveness, and we're going to see all of these different things start to arise that ultimately is going to damage the relationship. So remember, the person that you're in a relationship with, wrong or right, good or bad, better or worse, right? If you're trying to go the long haul with them, then you want to hold them in high esteem. If you have an issue with them, focus on the behavior. Don't criticize their character. So you can think of this as just as a follow-up to number 4, and specifically this deals with stonewalling again. So sometimes stonewalling comes about as a result of an individual receiving insults and mockery and sarcasm. Sometimes stonewalling comes about when none of that is taking place and an individual is getting a precise statement about a particular issue concerning them. At any rate, if an individual goes the route of stonewalling, then it's likely that their behavior is not going to have the results that they intend for them to have. In other words, the person that's receiving the stonewall, so to speak, the emotional shutdown, they're going to perceive it as being icy, and they're going to perceive their partner potentially as being very distant and unwilling to acknowledge their feelings, respect them, or even engage them. So stonewalling is just a bad practice all across the board, but in some situations, I would say that it would be justified. I mean, if somebody is being insulted and mocked and they're not being respected, then it may not be beneficial right there in that moment to really engage that person. And then once they calm down later on, obviously bring up the fact that, hey, you're really talking about me in a hurtful way. And if we're going to ever resolve conflict in our relationship, things need to be much more respectful. All right, guys, so you don't want no problems, right? Lil Scrappy came out with a record about 10 years ago that went, you don't want no problems. You don't want no problems with me, being me, we be fit to D. Hey. Okay. You guys don't even know that song, right? I know that we're on Generation Z now. Who knows what alphabet we're going to next? But at any rate, you guys want solutions, right? You want your relationships to go the distance. You want your relationships to be characterized by a great deal of vitality. So here's a solution that you can employ. As my favorite guitarist used to say a great deal, probably about 10 years ago as well. Say what you need to say what you need to say. So you want to make sure that you're saying what you need to say, you're saying what you mean to say, and you mean what you say. And you can do all of that by using I statements. I feel angry when this occurs, or you can use XYZ statements when you're presenting an issue to your partner. So when you leave dirty dishes in the sink, I feel frustrated. When you do not take out the trash, I feel frustrated. When we do not go out on dates, I feel that's not a feeling. I feel sad. right? So you want to make sure that those statements are focusing on behavior and that you're also identifying your feeling as well, right? If it's focusing on behavior, then it's not focusing on the person. If it's not focusing on the person or the character of the person, then there's a lower likelihood that they're going to get defensive. You're going to deal with stonewalling. You're going to have to deal with kitchen sinking and all of that, right? So you focus on behavior, right? And then you get across your particular feeling. Another thing that you want to avoid are extreme words. So you don't want to say, you never take out the trash. You never wash the dishes. You don't want to do that, right? Because most of the time when individuals employ extreme words like that, they're not really based in reality. So there may have been a time or two during the past couple of months where that guy took out the trash and he washed dishes and he took you out on a date. All of a sudden, if you lump everything together and make an extreme statement that says that he never does that, right, or he always does something, right, then that may cause the person to want to get defensive and be like, wait a second, like, all right, this is an issue that you're having, fine, but please acknowledge what I do, right? So you want to make sure that you're using I statements to express your feelings. Make sure you use XYZ statements to focus on behavior, identify your feeling. That type of statement can be the proper springboard to a solution. Finally, I want to end the video by talking about the power of validation. Validation is you simply recognizing someone else's point of view. You recognizing someone else's point. Now, validation doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with what is being said, right? But it does mean that, hey, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. So with validation, you don't necessarily need to be inauthentic, right? You don't necessarily need to express agreement, but it may be helpful to go, yeah, I see where you're coming from in regard to the dishes, or I see where you're coming from in regard to the drawers, but I want you to try to understand where I'm coming from too. Right? So in that statement that I just said, I validated the person's point of view, right? And then I came back and I said, I have a point of view of my own as well. In other words, I don't necessarily agree with you. So I respect what you're saying, but I'm not agreeing with you. And that's okay. That's okay. That's typical in relationships. Some people discover the similarities the longer they stay in relationships. And hopefully, in addition to discovering those things, they also discover similarities as well. And then the last thing I want to leave with you is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing can be extremely helpful in trying to avoid mind reading. So oftentimes, I'll use this with colleagues, I'll use this with family members and friends. If they say something, I will repeat back to them what they said in my own words. And I'm doing this as a means of ensuring that I got the right interpretation, because we're not perfect as it pertains to communication. Sometimes we don't say what we mean to say, and we don't mean what we say. And that's why a bit of grace is needed so that individuals could get their perspective right. So it doesn't hurt if somebody's telling you about a complaint that they're having, summarize that in your own words. I don't like it when you leave your dirty drawers by the bathtub. Honey, what I'm hearing is that, me leaving my drawers by the bathtub is making you feel frustrated. Do I have that right? Right. So in there, I did a paraphrase, and then I slipped in a clarification question as well. Right. And what this does for the individual that's giving the initial complaint is it makes them feel heard and understood. And if they don't feel heard and understood, then it provides an opportunity for them to say what they mean to say again, maybe in another way, so that they can be understood. All right. I didn't cover this earlier, but XYZ statements, the X stands for behavior, the Y stands for situation, and then Z stands for your feeling. Not literally, it doesn't stand for that, but X, Y, and Z just kind of thought to be placeholders for these types of solutions. Two quick final solutions. Perception checking really helps. So if you think that your partner may be feeling something, ask them. Right? If you think they may be thinking something, ask them, right? And then when they tell you what they're actually thinking and what they're feeling, Don't force your opinion on them, but actually receive what they're saying and believe it. If you don't have trust in your relationship, then there's no need of really continuing your relationship. And that's not necessarily for the individuals that are trying to build trust. And then maybe you want to consider having a time period where grievances can be voiced one at a time from each person in the relationship. So maybe this is once a week, maybe this is once a month, but that can be a time period in which individuals feel like, all right, this is a place where I can really voice my concern in a polite way, and that may alleviate a lot of the tension and a lot of the anxiety surrounding the conflict. So I hope that you got something from this lecture presentation. Again, feel free to share it with others. I am not purporting to be an expert, even though I have a doctorate degree in health psychology, clinical emphasis, all of that. I even have some experience. I got some skin in the game. I'm going on 8 years of marriage. I am not an expert on this, and I'm sure that if you were to have an open, honest dialogue with my wife, she would tell you that no, he is not an expert in this. He is growing. He is not the same man that I encountered about 10 years ago. So you are not alone in trying to get your communication right in intimate relationships, but I think that if we are cognizant of some of the common errors that crop up, then we can really be in a place to make sure that our relationships are really the stuff of our dreams. Take care, everybody.